Welcome to the Viking Age podcast. It's the official podcast of the vikingage.com. My name is Chris Schad. Excuse me here. I got to pull up my outline for the intro. I write for the Viking Age, Zone Coverage, Bring Me the News, and the Brookings Register. I do a lot, so I need to have it listed in front of me so I remember what it all is. But we do this every Monday with a late week episode right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. And we're also in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. So however you consume us, make sure you rate, comment, like, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. Okay, so today we got a solo tour. It feels like a Friday to me. We're doing this live on Thursday night, just talking some Vikings. A lot of people are either already up at the cabin, like you just told everybody to screw off for the actual Friday, or they are covering OTAs. So couldn't get a guest. That's okay. I'll just hang out with you guys. Hopefully, if you guys have some questions, drop them in the comments. I will get to those at the very end of the show, and we'll just try to have a good time here. So what I would like to do is just kind of recap some of the things we've seen on the internet the last couple of days when it comes to OTAs. No, Justin Jefferson is not there. That is not happening because, as you could tell by everybody who is liking, commenting, and subscribing on TikTok, he still doesn't have a contract. So everybody wants to play pretend and make trade destinations. My colleague Adam Patrick actually joked that because he was at the Timberwolves game, he's trying to work out a contract with the Wolves. I'm not going to talk about any of that because, like I said on Monday, I'm not going to deal with Justin Jefferson until he's either signed or traded. That's where we're at with this whole thing. So I would not waste energy on it at this point. Another thing that I wouldn't waste energy on right now is Sam Darnold being the starter in week 1. And that's kind of where I want to start right now with this episode. Sam Darnold is taking first team reps. JJ McCarthy is not at all. He's working exclusively as the second string at Vikings OTAs. The consensus opinion of people who are actually at OTAs, Alec Lewis being one of them, he was the one that said that, you know, it feels like there's a vapor trail coming off of JJ McCarthy's passes, that his arm is insane. Matthew Collar, friend of the show, also confirmed JJ McCarthy has a hell of an arm. But the catch right now is that Sam Darnold has the better accuracy. He's making better decisions. He's more comfortable with the offense. And those are things you expect with a veteran who has been in the league for, what has he been in here? 5-6 years? It feels like a lot longer because obviously people remember him from the Jets, but you know, he's been in the league for a while. This is his first season with the Vikings. So he's seen, you know, coverages that you're going to see in the NFL. He's worked with schemes that you're going to see in the NFL before. He also has experience going back to Kyle Shanahan's system, which is very similar to Sean McVay's system, which of course is very similar to Kevin O'Connell's system in Minnesota because he worked with Sean McVay. Those are things that are going to have a leg up. But of course, we're also going to see things on the internet that are going to try and declare things as soon as possible. Like, you know, JJ McCarthy has a pass behind Jordan Addison and people are going to freak out and call him a bust. And I think I saw another one on the Viking Age account where somebody goes, well, the pass was behind him. Let's stop sugarcoating things. And, you know, I'm not going to use the term that he used, but kissing up to JJ McCarthy right now. This is a long process. And I think you have to realize that not only from the typical, hey, what does a rookie need to do in the NFL? But when it comes to Kevin O'Connell's offense, I think Sam Darnold's going to be a lot harder to unseat as the starting quarterback that people think. Not because JJ McCarthy sucks or Sam Darnold's the next, you know, Baker Mayfield as the big free agent signing in the NFL. But I think that, you know, remember when Josh Dobbs took over the Vikings offense last year? And, you know, he comes in, he has that big game against Atlanta. Kevin O'Connell's basically telling him what to expect throughout the playbook. He doesn't know his teammates' names. It was very crazy how he was able to get the win. And even the next week against New Orleans. And then things kind of started to tail off. And everybody's like, you need to adjust your offense. You need to, you know, get some running plays in there. Well, first of all, there is, You can't just change your playbook in the middle of the season. Like you could add things, and Kevin O'Connell did that. Some of them not great. What was it? The TJ Hawkinson under center to the sweep handoff to Josh Dobbs that got him, I think, a helmet to helmet hit by Kareem Jackson. That wasn't called. I might have the name wrong there, but that was a play that he should probably light on fire and never run again, especially now that he has a mobile quarterback in JJ McCarthy. Like, there are little things you can do, but you can't overhaul your offense. And by the end of Josh Dobbs' term as a starter, he's missing windows down the field. Kevin O'Connell's getting frustrated. Could Kevin O'Connell have changed things to make things easier for Josh Dobbs? Sure, I think so. But one of the things that Kevin O'Connell does is, he makes things easy, and he wants his quarterback to run the offense. That is like his number one MO. It took Kirk Cousins until November of 2022 to get fully comfortable with his offense. He mentioned the Lions game in Detroit as a turning point for him, with a real familiarity with the offense. And we saw what Kirk Cousins did last year once, he was established in the offense. He had a full year to soak it in, a full offseason, same offensive coordinators, everything. And he looked great statistically. The Vikings were 4-4 when he got hurt, but as some of the Kirk Cousins, protectors or whatever you want to call it, Kirk Crusaders, that's what they're called by a major, by Score North, Kirk Crusaders, right? They would tell you, hey, Kirk knows the offense. He's going to ball down there. Hell, that's one of the reasons the Atlanta Falcons spent all that money to get him down there, because they run a similar LA Rams style scheme that Sean McVay got the most out of Matthew Stafford, that Kevin O'Connell got the most out of Kirk Cousins. Now, Zach Robinson, who's with the Rams, he's in Atlanta. He thinks he can get the most out of Kirk Cousins, and they're doing the same thing with Michael Penix down there, probably to the chagrin of Kirk Cousins, but that's not our problem anymore. So with so much to learn and so much to digest, decision-making is going to be a key for JJ McCarthy, and it's going to be a key for Sam Darnold. And I think the Vikings looked at Sam Darnold. They're like, that's the guy we want. We don't want Jacoby Brissett. We don't want Gardner Minshew. We don't want any of those guys. We want Sam Darnold. And everybody's eyebrows raised like, what are you doing? Like, this is like, Kevin O'Connell thinking he's bringing home a 10 from the bar and waking up and realize he's got a 3 laying next to him. Like, that is what Sam Darnold is to a lot of Vikings fans, because they know they've seen him before. Like, he had all those primetime games. And when you're a high profile pick and you flame out that spectacularly, things are going to go down the shitter, so to speak. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. We're trying to demonetize. So sorry, fan-sided. But here's, and maybe this is just me with a little bit of spring optimism, and it could definitely fall apart in the first month of the season. I think the Vikings can be okay with Sam Darnold at quarterback. And I know a lot of you are probably sitting there going like, oh, look, I saw him with the Jets and he was terrible and everything. Here's why I think this. Number one is the infrastructure. And if you ask the Vikings, they're going to tell you the same thing, that Sam Darnold's supporting cast and coaching staff were not good in his previous 2 stints as a starter. The New York Jets, you had Adam Gase as the head coach. His top receiver was Quincy Enunwa. I'm sure some of you picked him up on your waiver wires in your dynasty league. I think he was on my team for a little bit, but I got out of that league. I wasn't very good, so as you could tell. But I mean, the rest of the team on the Jets wasn't very good. It was just a dumpster fire situation that he walked into. Carolina Panthers, they have Matt Rule as their head coach. Not great. Not great. And then they assembled the Avengers of Mid. I think Adam Thielen came last year, but I mean, some of the signings that they've made, you look at them and you're just kind of like, what do you see here, guys? Like, it's very in the same vein of what the Vikings are doing with Darnold, where it didn't succeed somewhere else, but I bet we can fix them. And every coaching staff has an ego. Remember that, especially Kevin O'Connell. And that's not a slight towards Kevin O'Connell. It's just the truth. Like, coaches look at quarterbacks like Sam Darnold, who has awesome arm talent. If you go back and look at the scouting reports prior to I believe it was the 2018 draft. Yes, because it was Lamar Jackson in that draft. A lot of scouts drooled about his arm talent. He was 20 years old coming out of college, super young. Like a lot of people thought Sam Darnold was going to be a good quarterback at the next level, even though his stats weren't great at USC. Now they proved to be wrong. He's not a franchise quarterback. Otherwise, he'd still be with the Jets. But, you look at the Vikings and everything they have around Darnold. Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, Christian Darrisaw, Brian O'Neill. And oh, by the way, they have Kevin O'Connell on the sideline as that play caller. So I'm looking at this thinking that Kevin O'Connell is going to ask Darnold to do less than he's ever done in his career. And this sounds like settling, but it's not really, because the Vikings, if they really wanted to settle, they would have just went all in on Darnold and not drafted a quarterback. But I mean, with Darnold, they signed him to a 1-year, $10 million deal. They throw him in there. And if he's bad, is JJ McCarthy ready to go by week 7, week 8? I think I predicted week 9, JJ McCarthy starting against the Indianapolis Colts. I've heard predictions, and I think this is Star Tribune Ben Gessling saying he thinks that December game against Arizona is when we're going to see JJ McCarthy. And I'm still thinking there's a possibility that the Vikings want to go full red shirt with JJ McCarthy, because nobody wants to say this. This is a rebuilding year for the Vikings. Like, this is not this. How do I phrase this? This is not a year where it's Super Bowl or bust, to quote what was asked during Dan Campbell's press conference with the Lions today. This is a year where you want to see growth. Like, if the Vikings had went 7-9 last year, or 7-10, 17 game schedule, you're sitting there going like, oh, this team's not improving. Where are we going? We're spinning our wheels. Why is this happening? But if they go 7-10 this year, and maybe JJ McCarthy comes in at the end of the season, wins a couple of games, you're feeling pretty good. As a matter of fact, excuse me there. I wrote about this at zone coverage. Like, the Vikings should want to be like the Green Bay Packers this year. And I know a lot of you just threw up in your mouth when I said that. You're probably like, Chris is on acid today. He thinks Sam Darnold could be good. He thinks the Vikings should be like the Packers. But, the Packers last year started 2-5, 2-6. Then they win a couple of games. They get hot at the end of the year. They go to the playoffs. They go to the second round. And a lot of Green Bay Packer fans are very excited about what that team could do this year. You go back even further. The Philadelphia Eagles, they move on from Carson Wentz. Everybody's like, what are you doing? Why? Jalen Hurts, what's going on here? And you might have your opinions on, whether you think Jalen Hurts is good or not. But he got the Eagles to the Super Bowl. And the year before that, they made the playoffs in what was supposedly a rebuilding year. So I think that even if you don't make the playoffs, and it'll be disappointing, like, obviously you want to make the playoffs, you want the Vikings to be good as possible, but you see a long-term plan that's going on here. And getting back to Sam Darnold, like, I think that he's basically there to be a stabilizer. I don't know if that'll work, but here's an interesting thing when I kind of looked at, Kirk Cousins' stats. The two things that really interest me, especially when it comes to Kirk Cousins and Kevin O'Connell and everything else, are turnover-worthy plays and big-time throws. I looked up Kirk Cousins' big-time throws and turnover-worthy plays under Kevin O'Connell. He had 3% big-time throw percentage, 2.3% turnover-worthy plays. In 2022, he had 4.3% big-time throw percentage, 2.9 turnover-worthy plays. I kind of wish I made a graphic for this because it might be a little bit easier to understand. But here are the big-time throw percentages without Kevin O'Connell. So you had 3% in 2023. You had 4.3% in 2022. So you have 5% in 2021. That was last year of the Zimmer era. 4.3% in 2020, 4.4% in 2019, and 4.1% in 2018. So then you look at turnover plays. Kirk Cousins' career turnover worthy play rate, it was 2.3% and 2.9% with Kevin O'Connell. And it hovered around that 3% clip without KOC, like during the Zimmer era, and throughout his career, which includes a couple of years in Washington, maybe a year or two, where it was kind of like he was the backup, but he made a couple of starts. His career numbers are a 4.4 big time throw percentage and a 3.0 turnover worthy play rate. The 4.4 big time throw percentage is comparable to Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield, and CJ Stroud. Pretty good, right? That was about 18th last year if you were to extrapolate his career numbers over a full season. But 3% turnover worthy play rate, that's the same as Jimmy Garoppolo, Russell Wilson, and Josh Allen. So maybe a little high, but it's doable. And of course, Cousins was at his best last year when he had a 2.3% turnover worthy play rate. Now, here's the thing. Sam Darnold, 3.7% career big time throw percentage. That would have been just below Kenny Pickett if we're using last season's numbers. 4.1 turnover worthy play rate is Daniel Jones and Sam Howell. Not great. But like you look at all this, and I think the thing that you could take away is that Kevin O'Connell tries to make things easier for the quarterback, right? Because you saw Kirk Cousins' big time throw percentage routinely in the fours. He even had that the first year when he was trying to make all those comebacks in 2022, but it dropped to 3% when he was more comfortable with the offense. Like Sam Darnold, like if he can make the right decisions, they should be right there for him. They should be, this is obvious. Justin Jefferson is open. Jordan Addison is open. TJ Hawkinson is open. Excuse me, need some water here. Sorry about that. I mean, they are looking to make things easy as possible. And what's great about that is when JJ McCarthy is ready, it's not going to be Matthew Collard used this joke and it's sticking in my head, so I'll give him credit for it. It's not going to be rocket science when JJ McCarthy gets out there and he has to make decisions in the middle of an NFL game. Frog in my throat, excuse me. He's just going to be able to go out there and go, okay, read 1, read 2, read 3 is open. Like that is what you're hoping for. And it takes time for that to happen. JJ McCarthy is 21 years old. He turned 20 in January. Like there's a lot of development to be there. And I think a lot of the pessimists would look and go, well, yeah, that's why Jim Harbaugh didn't use him at Michigan. No, Jim Harbaugh didn't use JJ McCarthy at Michigan because he had one of the best offensive lines in college football. And he had two of the best running backs in college football, Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum. So, I mean, it's going to take time. This is not, I've used this term before. This is not fast food. This is not McDonald's or Burger King. Roman Reigns once said this. This is filet mignon. This is the good stuff. Like you have to be able to pay attention for more than just, a 5-second a 5-second TikTok clip where they're like, passes behind Jordan Addison. I don't know. JJ McCarthy sure looks like a bust. Like you don't know anything sitting at home. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think Sam Darnold is going to be an all-pro. I don't think that, if he's a disaster, I won't be particularly surprised. But I think they're going to make things easier for him. And I think that he's going to go out there and he's going to be a little tougher to take down than people think. And I think that, if he goes out there, maybe you win 7 or 8 games, but you're comfortable with that. You're okay with that for this year because it's a step in the right direction. You have JJ McCarthy in the next year. And the other thing is, if Sam Darnold plays well, can you franchise him, maybe trade him to a team that's kind of enamored? I don't know if that's realistic to think that could happen because, I mean, a team's going to look at one good year by Sam Darnold, look at 5 bad years and go, well, I think we know who that is. But let's see what's going on here in the comments. All Day Express checking in. He says, Darnold better be the guy. And he says, I want to see JJ sit for some time. I think it matters on what we see from JJ during training camp. Like, I don't think this is hard to explain because I don't think that JJ McCarthy is going to come in and I mean, it would be great, but I mean, day one starter, I have my doubts. Not because of talent, not because of anything, just because Kevin O'Connell wants their like this is all about the programming with JJ McCarthy. It's not about the talent. It's more about, hey, do you know what to do when you're out there? And if you don't, Kevin O'Connell doesn't want them out there. That's why he went to Nick Mullins after a couple of starts, because he's like, Nick Mullins knows what to do when he goes out there. Now he knows what to do. He just can't get the ball where he wants it to be because he's got a 7% turnover rate since he's been in Minnesota. But that's another conversation. Like, if JJ McCarthy doesn't play this year, he's not a bust. Like, we won't know about that until, year 2, year 3. I don't know if this becomes a Trey Lance situation, then okay, yeah, it's a bust. But I mean, so far it seems like he seems okay out there. He's not a complete disaster. So things aren't exactly going bad. So we'll check in on the comments a little bit later. By the way, if you're joining me, thank you for joining me tonight. This is the Viking Age podcast. We do this every Monday and with a Lake Week episode. I'm usually joined by Adam Patrick on Mondays, and we try to get a guest later in the week. With Memorial Day weekend, a lot of people were busy, so I'm just kind of going on here and just spouting some Viking stuff and recapping some things from OTAs. One of the other things was Wes Phillips talking to the media and saying, just talking about the Vikings running game. And he basically said that he doesn't think they're going to change anything with the running scheme. That, signing Aaron Jones was just basically assembling talent and getting the talent in there and just kind of plugging him in. If you've watched the Vikings running game the last 2 years, it's not great. Like, you kind of wanted to see some kind of change, maybe a little bit more outside zone. Maybe a power-based scheme would have been a good answer. The Rams switched from zone to power last year, and they wound up getting the most out of Kyren Williams, who's now hurt. But you can kind of see, how that can affect something. And you also have to wonder too, Wes Phillips, journalism 101, why is this person lying to me, right? Like, he's not going to come out and be like, well, actually, we're going to do this, and we didn't really like this, and like whatever. No, they're going to keep things as vanilla as possible, whether it's a press conference, whether it's practice, whatever they're doing. So those things, I don't know. You can kind of sift through and see what happens at OTAs. Like, I remember Dalvin Cook lining up in the slot a couple years ago, and every fantasy football analyst jumping all over it. He never did that. So that was a thing that didn't come to fruition during OTAs. Now, Ivan Pace Jr. coming out, taking over those second team reps. That's something that came to fruition after OTAs. But it's going to be, you just have to kind of sift through the BS, so to speak. You have to kind of sift through and say, okay, is this legit? Is this not legit? That sort of thing. This concerns me because of what I've saw from Alexander Madison last year, because that dude basically ran into a brick wall every time he got the football. Part of it might have been because of his vision, which people like to talk about a lot, but part of it was too, Ty Chandler gets in there and that dude had to fight for every yard he got. It wasn't exactly like wide open holes along the offensive line, which I think is why they got rid of Dalton Reisner. And we'll talk about Blake Brandel in just a minute here, because he seems like he's the starting guard. But, Aaron Jones is going to give you different things than Alexander Madison did last year, or even Ty Chandler. Like, how many screens got dropped last year, or even the last 2 years? Like, that's not great. I worry if he goes down, are you looking at Ty Chandler, who I've been critical of on this show, because it seems like the coaching staff looks at him and they think, okay, there's one thing that's not adding up here. Like, those are things you kind of gotta, again, you gotta sift through the BS. Is this true, or is there something behind it? Is Ty Chandler a poor pass protector? Aaron Jones is a good one. That's something you kind of got to consider here. Is Myles Gaskin going to get an opportunity? Is Dwayne McBride going to get an opportunity? I think this is really just comes down to a microcosm of how the Vikings view running backs, where I think they see that running backs are as interchangeable as ever. Again, I'm using the Rams a lot as an example here today, but Kyren Williams they used him as a workhorse last year, and he got really banged up to the point where he's not even healthy for OTAs. Like, they're talking to Blake Corum, like, work on your pass protection and pass catching because we're going to need you. Like, that is not a good situation brewing in Los Angeles right now. And that might be a sign of their approach here as we head into the season. Um, let's talk about another area I'm a little concerned about. Let's just go to there. I already kind of hinted at it. Blake Randall, this starting left guard. The Vikings obviously had Dalton Reisner hit free agency. Reisner has not signed. He's still out there. He's still either looking for a big contract or teams just kind of know something that we don't about him, kind of Ty Chandler style. Um, it's a bit concerning because we have a bit of PTSD with guards, and we don't really have a sample size, like a legitimate sample size of Blake Randall as a guard to go off of. He's been a tackle. He moved to guard last year. I think his career high in snaps is just above 200. Like, he's never been a full-time player. Is this a player that's kind of like Madison was last year, where everybody kind of looked at him and be like, are you sure about this? And the Vikings were like, yeah, we'll just plug him in, whatever. It won't matter. And it wound up mattering in a big way. It might also be kind of another philosophy thing with Kevin O'Connell because, a couple years ago when he took the job, Garrett Bradbury a lot of people thought he was dead to rights, going to get let go. I think he was a free agent or something. And Kevin O'Connell was at the combine saying, I see a lot of good things in Garrett Bradbury. We can use them to our advantage and whatever. And everybody just kind of thought it was coach speak. And then they signed him to a 3-year contract as soon as free agency started. Everybody went, huh? Well, that 2022 season, outside of a back injury, they got a lot of good things out of Garrett Bradbury. Last year, not so much. He kind of reverted a little bit. But, I think the Vikings know. I think the Vikings feel like their scheme is kind of, it helps the quarterback out and it helps the offensive line out, especially when you have a mobile quarterback that can move around the pocket like JJ McCarthy can. Sam Darnold, a little bit more of a pocket passer, but he has some athleticism to extend plays, something that Kirk Cousins rarely showed. Like, I think he had the ability. It was just kind of not there at times. It would be great to have a grown ass man in the trenches. Like, go sign somebody that's big and can move people and everything else. I mean, even the Rams signed Jonah Jackson to a 3-year contract this offseason. He was with Detroit. Like, I think the Vikings would like to have that player. Maybe they think Ed Ingram can be that guy on the right guard who, as much as people dog on him, he took a step forward last year. He cut his pressures down by 33%. His pressure rate was still pretty high, but it was progress. Can he jump a step further in year 3? Blake Randall's been in this situation, or this system rather, for 3 years now. Or yeah, this will be his 3rd year because Kevin O'Connell took over 2 years ago and then, kind of getting to where we are now. So, I mean, the offensive line's kind of a concern for me. I know they took Michael Juergens. I know that, Kwesi wanted Juergens in the 7th round. He was one of the players that they were targeting. Walter Rouse could also be in the mix. They've been talking about him a little bit, maybe moving to guard at some point, but I think he's going to start at tackle. Like, these are a lot of, they're assembling depth along the line. And I like that. But I don't know. Would you feel comfortable with one more signing to kind of stir it all together? I think I would, but right now we're just going to have to trust the coaching staff. And we're sitting here in week 3. We're going to go, okay, you made a mistake. How are you going to fix it? Last year they made a mistake. They signed Dalton Reisner. Did they bring him back? I feel like if he hasn't gotten his contract by now, he's not going to come back here like all happy-go-lucky going like, oh yeah, I wanted to come back here all along. No, he probably just wanted his payday, which nothing wrong with that. Go get your money if you're an NFL player. But that is his prerogative, it seems like. Let's go to the 3rd wide receiver because this is another thing that's kind of popped up. The Vikings haven't really brought in anyone of substance this offseason at receiver. My apologies to Trent Sherfield, who was a free agent signing. Nobody in the draft. It was a strong receiver class. The Vikings said, no, thank you. It seems like they want to trust their back end guys. Jalen Naylor is the name that we know well. 6th round pick in that 2022 draft. Got banged up a couple of times last season. Couldn't really stay on the field. Can he stay on the field and can he ascend to that role? You have Tristan Jackson, you have Brandon Powell, you have other guys that I think the Vikings trust, but the third wide receiver, the Vikings run a lot of 3 receiver sets, but the third receiver, it doesn't have a role in terms of like fantasy production or whatever. You're not going to have a guy, Brandon Stokely with the Colts, right? Because you had Marvin Harrison, you had Reggie Wayne, and then you had Brandon Stokely, and they all had 1,000 yards in the 90s or in the 2000s, like the first time in NFL history. I think it's going to happen a lot more with a 17 game schedule in the current nature of the NFL. And I think it might have already happened, but this system likes to use the wide receiver 3 as the grunt work guy. And in Los Angeles, another Rams reference, they use Cooper Kupp with everything because he's a really good run blocker. Like he can clear out routes. He commands attentions. That's why Puka Nacua is good, even though he's a very talented receiver. Otherwise, like he's able to kind of do that dirty work. KJ Osborne was the guy who had to do it last year. And even when Justin Jefferson went down, he didn't jump up into that wide receiver 2 role because his role of blocking and clearing out and everything else was just too valuable for the offense. And they ran things through Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson. So I don't know. I mean, KJ Osborne never had a 700-yard season. I think his career high was 655, and that was 2 years ago. And like, also look at the receiver prices on the free agent market. Like, they are not cheap, especially if you just need a third receiver. You probably want to spend that money somewhere else. It seems like this regime is very cost conscious. So that is another thing to consider. What else do we got here? We're kind of running out of things here, but it's just kind of a get me over episode today. Just kind of get you up to date on what's going on at OTAs. Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth. It kind of seems like they're having a last stand right now. Lewis Cine is buried on the depth chart, as we all know. That happened at the end of last year. He was inactive for the second half. He's basically got to show something in the next couple of weeks to avoid getting cut, because I don't know, he hasn't shown us much. He had the leg injury last year that may have been a factor, but right now, they signed, Harrison Smith is back, Josh Metellus is back, Cam Bynum is back, and Theo Jackson is the 4th safety right now. So, I mean, unless you're going to have Lewis Cine as a highly paid special teams guy, I don't think there's a spot on him on this roster for him right now. And you're probably going to have to cut him. You're going to drop $2.2 million to make that happen. But, and if you want to as well, I mean, yeah, scream about Kyle Hamilton. He was right there for the Vikings when they were on the clock. I mean, that whole trade has been a disaster when you think about it, because so I think they were at 12. They go down. The Lions take Jameson Williams, who Dan Campbell kind of pumped the tires of today, saying he's a man on a mission. The Ravens take Kyle Hamilton. Even the Eagles got Jordan Davis, who's a beast in the middle of the trenches. That would be nice to have on the defensive line. But, you with those picks, you wind up taking Cine at 32. You trade down again from 34. I think you traded up to get Andrew Booth. You took Ed Ingram a little bit later in the second round, which jury's still out on that pick. And then Brian Asamoah was MIA last year, even though he had ankle and shoulder surgery. So, I mean, Cine, it just doesn't seem like the athleticism that they really liked translated over. And it's really interesting because he was a good player at Georgia, but he was also playing on one of the greatest college football defenses of all time. So was it just kind of a byproduct of what was around him, making him look a lot better than he was? Or was this just a prospect the Vikings just whiffed on, which is possible because it was a lot of the old regime in charge? One moment. Gotta keep the pipes ready to go here. Andrew Booth, that's the last guy I'm going to talk about here. Might have a shot to make the roster. They signed Shaq Griffin and Kyrie Thompson, or they drafted Kyrie Thompson rather. But other than that, you don't really have too much going on. Like Byron Murphy Jr., excuse me, he's going to kick it in the slot. The Vikings want to use him there. That was their plan. Injuries and poor performance kind of forced him into the outside, which is a role he's not really great at. So, hopefully that holds up. They have a lot of depth out there. You have a Caleb Evans who was a starter. You have Mekhi Blackman who was a starter at times last year. Like the Vikings, it's a very fluid situation at corner, and I think it's going to be one of the interesting training camp battles to watch because you want to see somebody take that over and give Brian Flores some consistent play on the outside. Like that was their problem. I think another thing that will help them as well is a better pass rush where Danielle Hunter is not your only threat. You have Dallas Turner. You have a bunch of other guys Andrew Van Ginkel, Jonathan Grenard, even Blake Cashman can flip out to the outside from time to time. I think those are good things for the Vikings to have. And I think it's going to make the defense that much better. So we've seen stranger things happen with corners where it takes them a while to get going. Trey Waynes didn't start for the first, I think it was 2 seasons. He was just on special teams and he started to get some reps at the end of the second season. Booth might be one of those guys. And of course, health is a factor with him. He needs to stay healthy. If he doesn't stay healthy, he's probably going to get cut. So that's something you can look forward to there as well. So kind of a sloppy episode. I don't have any other comments in the comment section. So I'm just going to shut her down here for the night, which thank you again for joining me on the Viking Age podcast. I appreciate it. Sometimes, I would love to have a guest. Sometimes it doesn't work. And, I kind of just like, okay, I'll just rant into space for about 30, 40 minutes. But I appreciate all of you. We're almost up to 1,100 subscribers on the Viking Age podcast, which is kind of awesome. So go ahead, smash that subscribe button if you're watching us. Also, like, comment, do all those cool YouTube things. We do this every Monday with a late week episode right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. Hoping to get some guests on in the near future. I talked to Pro Football Focus's Trevor Sikkema, who hopefully will be coming on next week to talk a little bit about the Vikings draft and some of the drafts around the NFC. By the way, you can also follow me at The Real Chris Schad. Like I say, I do write for the Viking Age. I have a couple of good articles going up right now. One dropped today. I believe it was players that the Vikings should cut bait with. Another one just kind of talking about some of the areas I kind of wish they addressed during the offseason. I can't remember the actual title of the article off the top of my head, but a lot of good writers. We got Nick Miller over there. We got Adam Patrick. Believe it's Matt Falk. The One Bar and Lupicus show. Maybe I'm thinking of the other guy, but my apologies if you're watching this, but they do a great job as well. Just a lot of good stuff over at the Viking Age. So you can go ahead and you can check that out. But that is all the time we have until Monday. Thank you for watching. This has been the Viking Age podcast.